They fired the black CEO until she bought the entire company back overnight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. That's right, get her out. The boardroom felt colder than usual. No one spoke, no one moved, until a sharp voice sliced through the quiet, calculated, rehearsed. Two security officers stepped forward in unison. Their black shoes echoed against the polished floor as they reached for Amara Johnson, the woman seated at the head of the table. She didn't resist. She didn't even blink. Her expression stayed steady dignity wrapped in stillness. Across the table, Richard Vale, interim chairman, smiled with a confidence born of arrogance. Escorting her out is the best thing for this company, he announced, half to the room, half to the cameras that weren't supposed to be recording. A few board members nodded. Others looked down, pretending to read documents that didn't matter anymore. A young analyst, barely 25, lifted her phone. Her hands trembled, but the lens held steady. This moment would go viral before the meeting even ended. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Amara. Miss Johnson, Richard said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. The board has voted. Your leadership is no longer in the company's best interest. Amara's chazam is calm, unreadable. I see, she replied. And I assume you've already prepared the press statement. He smirked. Efficiency, Amara. You taught us that. The guards waited for her to move. She didn't. Instead, she placed her hands flat on the table, tracing the grain of the mahogany she'd chosen herself when she founded this company 7 years ago. Back then, this same table had been delivered to a one-room office downtown, where she and 2 interns built the first prototype that made Nexus Dynamics a billion-dollar name. Now they were removing her from it. One of the guards cleared his throat. Ma'am. Amara rose, slow and deliberate, every inch of her posture saying what her voice didn't. I am not defeated. She adjusted her blazer, straightened her sleeves, and looked around the room one last time. Richard's assistant whispered, her access is already cut. Another voice added, legal says she forfeits all rights effective immediately. They spoke like she wasn't standing right there. The older guard gestured toward the door. This way, ma'am. Amara glanced at him, and for a split second, something flickered empathy, maybe, or recognition. Then she turned to Richard. Tell me, she said softly, when did you forget who built this place? He chuckled. Business isn't sentimental. Her phone, face down on the table, buzzed once silent, unnoticed by everyone but her. A message flashed on the locked screen. Transfer confirmed. Ownership executed. Amara smiled faintly, just enough for the intern with the camera to notice. Then she said the line that would echo across every news feed within the hour. Funny, she whispered, eyes steady on Richard. I own this company. The room froze. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. One guard released her arm. The other glanced at his radio, uncertain. No one moved, not yet, because they all sensed something irreversible had just shifted. And Amara Johnson, the woman they'd tried to erase, was about to rewrite the ending. The elevator doors closed behind her with a hush that felt almost ceremonial. Amara stood between 2 security guards, their reflections fractured in the mirrored walls. She didn't look at them. She looked at herself, composed, calm, but burning just beneath the surface. The ride down 42 floors took less than a minute. The silence lasted a lifetime. When the doors slid open, the lobby erupted in whispers. Employees froze mid-stride. Phones lifted. Everyone had seen the internal alert. Leadership transition, effective immediately. And there she was, the woman who'd once built the company's foundation, walking out like an intruder. Outside, the Manhattan sky was a sheet of steel. Wind pressed against the revolving doors as Amara stepped onto the sidewalk, heels striking concrete like a metronome of defiance. She didn't look back. If she did, she might have remembered the day she first walked into that same building 7 years earlier, holding a cardboard box filled with ideas no one believed in. Back then, Nexus Dynamics wasn't a tech empire. It was a handful of people, 2 laptops, and 1 vision, making AI systems transparent and ethical. They'd laughed at her pitch. AI for accountability, they said. Sounds poetic, not profitable. But she'd turned poetry int. Until te. As she reached the corner, a black car pulled up. Her Ascara jumped out, phone in hand. Amara raised up Kara's eyes. Amara node. Kara glanced around. Several bystanders were still filming through the glass. This is already tea. Amara. They slipped into the car. Inside, the city noise muted. Karati. We're the Majo. Amara exe. Perfect, she. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. For 7, yay. S. Now she W. Traffic lights flickered red. Amaranexu. Her own. Foe. Kara's L. Amara's phone vibrated again, another message. This one, acquisite. Thuh. Then midnight. Kara looked at her reflection in the window. What do we do now? Amara's answer cam. We go home. Outside, rain began to fall thin, silver, cleansing. And so, by the time the woe show, by noon, the clip had crossed 3 million views. The title read, Black CEO fired on camera, watch her reaction. No music, no edits, just 60 seconds of truth. Amara being let out, her silence louder than any speech. In offices across Manhattan, people whispered her name. Some with sympathy, others with fear. At Nexus headquarters, the PR department was in meltdown. Reporters camped outside the glass entrance, shouting questions no one dared answer. Inside, Richard Vale sat at the long boardroom table, the same one Amara had chosen years ago. He scrolled through headlines on his tablet, each one worse than the last. Racial bias scandal hits Nexus. Ethical AI company faces ethical disaster. He muttered, this is a PR nightmare. But what he didn't know was that it wasn't just PR, it was prophecy. Across town, in Amara's apartment, the blinds were half closed. Rain tapped against the glass like a metronome of reckoning. Kara's laptop glowed on the kitchen counter, showing a live feed of every trending post. CNN just picked it up, she said. And Forbes. They're calling it the Nexus firing. Amara leaned back in her chair, calm, focused. Good. Let the world see what they built. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her lawyer. Acquisition funds cleared. Secondary filings live at 1 p.m. She looked at her watch, 12:47. 13 minutes, until the moment the company would legally belong to her again. Kara, she said quietly, open the system dashboard. Kara's fingers flew. Nexus servers came alive on the screen, secure, encrypted, pulsing like a digital heartbeat. Lines of code, transaction logs, internal chat feeds. Amara's fingerprints were still everywhere. They never revoked your root admin access, Kara whispered, half in disbelief. Amara smiled. Because they thought I was gone. That's the problem with people who underestimate silence. They confuse it with absence. Kara looked up. Do you want me to lock them out now? Not yet, Amara said. Let them have their last meeting. She turned her gaze to the screen, where a live camera feed showed the lobby downstairs. Journalists, employees, protesters, it was chaos. Signs read, Justice for Amara, and Let her speak. For the first time in hours, Amara allowed herself a small breath of vindication. Her mind flashed back Atlanta 10 years earlier. Her first startup pitch, the investor who said, You're impressive, but not the face we want representing innovation. That sentence had burned into her memory like a brand. And now, every headline, every hashtag, every camera outside Nexus was rewriting that same story on her terms. At 12:59, she stood. Patch me into their system, she said. Audio only. Oh, Kara hesitated. You're sure? Amara nodded. They fired me publicly. I'll return the favor quietly. One tap later, her voice filled the boardroom speakers on the 42nd floor, calm, clear, and devastatingly controlled. Good afternoon, board members, she began. Richard's tablet slipped from his hand. You might want to check your email. He froze. The room erupted in motion, phones buzzing, notifications flashing red. Each board member stared at the same subject line. Notice of ownership transfer, effective immediately. Amara's voice continued, even. You fired me at 10:07, you lost the company at 1:01. Then the line went dead. The boardroom fell silent again, same table, same air, but power had shifted. Somewhere downtown, Amara looked out the window as thunder rolled in. She wasn't just trending anymore. She was back in control. The storm outside had settled into a soft, steady rhythm. Thunder rolled in the distance like a low drum beat, keeping time with Amara's thoughts. The city beneath her window glowed faintly, half drowned in rain and reflection. She sat at her dining table, no boardroom, no assistants, no audience this time. Just her, a laptop, and a folder marked Reinstatement Protocol. The same precision she once used to build Nexus now fueled her revenge. Kara appeared from the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You've been quiet for a long time," she said carefully. Amara's eyes didn't leave the screen. Quiet is how storms gather. On the monitor, lines of code scrolled like rainfall. Each one a command revoking board credentials, resetting admin hierarchies, restoring her founder's privileges. She'd written these protocols herself years ago, not out of paranoia, out of foresight. Back then, she'd joked with the engineers, "Always leave yourself a back door just in case they lock you out." They'd laughed. No one was laughing now. Kara leaned closer. "They're still inside the building. Richard's holding an emergency press conference at 4. Amara looked up. "Perfect. We'll make sure it's his last." Her phone vibrated. Message from Legal Team, subject, Media Assets Cleared. Attached was a full press release bearing her name and title, effective immediately. Nexus Dynamics welcomes back its founder and majority owner, Amara Johnson. She exhaled through a quiet smile. "Send it at 3:59. Kara frowned. "You want to hit them mid-conference?" Amara nodded. "Timing is power. They used it against me this morning. I'll return the courtesy." For a moment, silence filled the room again. Amara reached into her drawer and pulled out a small silver flash drive. Inside it, the original patent files, the contracts, the digital backbone of Nexus itself. Everything she'd built, everything they'd tried to erase. She ran her thumb across it gently, like one might trace a scar. "You know," she said softly, "the first time I walked into that office, I was wearing a borrowed suit and hope. They said I didn't look like a CEO. Now they'll look at me and see what that mistake costs." Kara's expression softened. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." Amara looked at her, voice calm but heavy. "It's not about proving. It's about balance." She rose, walked to the window, and watched the storm begin again. Rain hammering glass, lightning cutting across the skyline like a signature. Her reflection stared back stronger, colder, untouchable. Down below, traffic pulsed. The Nexus building loomed in the distance, its logo flickering against the clouds. Soon, everyone inside would see her name return to the system in real time. Every display, every email header, every internal login changing line by line. Kara checked the clock. 3:37. Amara turned from the window. "Good. Open the live feed. Let's watch history correct itself." At that moment, the rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass like applause. And for the first time all day, Amara allowed herself to breathe, not in relief, but in readiness. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was precision, the calm heartbeat right before the strike. At exactly 3:59 p.m., the boardroom lights flickered. Downstairs, in the lobby of Nexus Dynamics, dozens of reporters had already gathered, umbrellas dripping, microphones pointed, cameras live. The rain hadn't stopped, but neither had the story. At the podium stood Richard Vale, his silver hair slicked back, his confidence rehearsed. Behind him, a massive digital screen projected the Nexus logo, blue and white, corporate and cold. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, smiling tightly, "today we move forward. Leadership transitions are never easy, but our vision remains strong. Nexus continues." Then the screen blinked. For a split second, static, then another flash, and another. The Nexus logo dissolved, replaced by a single black background and white text. Statement from Amara Johnson, founder and majority owner. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Richard froze mid-sentence, staring at the words like they'd come from another world. On cue, every screen in the building, from the lobby to the 42nd floor, shifted to the same feed. Amara's face appeared, calm and steady, illuminated by soft natural light. Her voice carried through the speakers, smooth and unshaken. "Good afternoon. This morning, I was escorted out of my company publicly, without warning and without truth. They told me my leadership was over. But leadership isn't a title, it's a record, and mine is permanent. Richard stepped back from the podium, his hand twitching toward the security guard beside him. "Cut the feed," he hissed. The guard muttered into his earpiece. Nothing happened. "I founded Nexus Dynamics to make systems more accountable," Amara continued. Today, that system corrected itself. At that exact line, Kara hit send. Every major news outlet received the official press release simultaneously, time-stamped 3:59 p.m., signed by Amara herself. Within seconds, phone screens across the lobby lit up. Breaking. Fired CEO regains control of Nexus in overnight takeover. Reporters shouted questions. "Is this real? Did she just say majority owner?" Richard's jaw clenched. "This is unauthorized content," he barked. But another voice, one of the PR managers, stammered, "Sir, it's coming from the internal server. Her credentials are active again." He turned pale. "That's impossible." "To the employees still inside," Amara's voice went on, "check your inbox. You'll find your pay, your rights, and your dignity reinstated. Effective immediately, the old board has been dissolved." In the crowd, an intern, the same one who had filmed that morning, covered her mouth in disbelief. The reporters swarmed forward, shouting louder now. "Mr. Vale, did she really own the company? Is this a hostile takeover or a legal return?" Richard's voice cracked for the first time. "End this broadcast now." But upstairs, in the control room, an IT technician looked at the screen and whispered, "She's in root access, we can't stop it." On the monitors, Amara's expression softened. "To those who stood silent while they removed me, I understand. Fear is powerful, but truth is louder." Her image faded to black. Then one final line appeared across every screen. "Integrity doesn't expire at 10:07 a.m. Silence fell over the lobby, thick, electric, undeniable. Reporters stared at their cameras, unsure whether to keep filming or just watch. Richard Vale stood alone at the podium, drenched in the blue light of a brand he no longer controlled. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and high above Manhattan, in a quiet apartment lit by stormlight, Amara closed her laptop. Her reflection in the window was calm, focused, finished with silence. It was 4:01 p.m. The counterstrike had landed. The silence that followed the broadcast was the kind that crushed air out of lungs. No one in the Nexus boardroom moved. The glow from the screen painted every face in cold blue light, guilt, shock, and something worse, recognition. Richard Vale's voice finally broke the stillness. "This isn't real," he muttered almost to himself. "It's a stunt." "Oh." But even as he spoke, his tablet buzzed with a new notification. "Access revoked." He blinked, tapped the screen. Nothing. Across the table, other executives stared down at their own devices. Each one flashed the same message. Authorization expired. One by one, their corporate power vanished in real time. Richard slammed a fist on the table. "Somebody fix this." But the IT director, a pale man with trembling hands, whispered, "Sir, her credentials supersede ours. Founder's key. It's hard-coded." The words hung in the air like a confession. Downstairs, the crowd outside the glass doors had grown. Employees gathered shoulder to shoulder, watching the screens through the rain. They weren't sure what to do, but they knew something irreversible had just happened. The building that had once felt owned now belonged to someone else again. In the boardroom, panic rippled. Phones rang. Lawyers texted. A PR consultant burst through the door. "Richard, CNN is requesting a live response right now." He looked at her blankly. "We're not giving them anything. No comments until legal." Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, then froze. "Sir, legal just emailed me a termination notice, signed by Amara Johnson." Every head turned. For a long moment, no one breathed. Richard's eyes darted to the window, then to the door, as if there might still be an exit from this reality. "She can't," he began, but stopped, because deep down he knew she could. He'd read the bylaws himself, years ago, when they drafted them to protect the founder. He was just arrogant enough to think those laws would never be used against him. The elevator bell chimed. All heads turned toward the hallway. Footsteps, slow, confident, echoing across marble. And then she appeared. Amara Johnson. No entourage, no guards. Just her umbrella dripping, hair damp from rain, presence filling the room like a returning storm. No one spoke. She set her umbrella against the wall, walked to the head of the table, the seat they had taken from her that morning, and sat down. For a moment, she said nothing. only the sound of rain against glass. Richard finally found his voice. How did you? Amara raised a hand. Don't waste your breath. You're no longer authorized to speak on behalf of this company. He glared, red creeping into his face. You think this little stunt changes anything? The investors? She cut him off. Have already called me. They prefer leadership that doesn't implode on live television. A few executives looked away, ashamed. One of them, Marla, the HR director, quietly slid her Nexus badge across the table. For what it's worth, she said softly, you deserved better. Amara looked at her, eyes steady but not unkind. So did you. All of you. The digital clock on the wall read 4:17 p.m. The same time her phone chimed with a final alert. System restored. Founder protocol complete. She turned to Richard. You fired me at 10:07. I reinstated myself at 4:17. 6 hours to remind you ownership doesn't depend on approval. The boardroom was silent again, but this time the silence belonged to her. Amara leaned back, calm, unshaken. Now, she said, her voice quiet but sharp, let's talk about accountability. Oh. And somewhere below, in the lobby full of watching eyes, applause began soft at first, then rising, echoing upward through glass and steel. The applause from the lobby rose through the building like thunder traveling up a canyon. It reached the 42nd floor, rolled beneath the boardroom doors, and settled in the silence that followed Amara's words. She didn't move right away. Her stillness was deliberate, the kind that forces everyone else to fill the space with their own fear. When she finally spoke, her tone was soft enough to make every word sting harder. Let's start with accountability. Her laptop chimed as the founder protocol loaded in full view of the room. A glowing dashboard filled the screen access logs, expense reports, private messages, hidden transactions. Every secret the board had buried, every corner they thought she'd never see again, now stood wide open. Kara entered quietly, carrying a folder thick with printed documents. She placed it in front of Amara like an exhibit at a trial. Everything you asked for, she said. Amara nodded once. Thank you. Richard leaned forward, trying to steady his voice. You can't use that data, those are internal communications. Amara met his eyes. So are the emails you used to orchestrate my removal. I'm just restoring balance. She tapped one key. The main screen split into 4 panels, each showing a different thread of evidence. Board votes manipulated. Investor calls faket. Legal memos altered. Gasps broke the silence. One executive whispered, Richard, you told us these were approved. He didn't answer. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles blanched white. Amara's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. When you remove a founder, she said, you inherit her vision, her risk, and her receipts. Ugh. Kara stepped aside as 2 members of corporate security entered, different guards this time, the ones Amara had personally appointed years ago. Their presence changed the air instantly. Amara gestured toward Richard, then the 2 executives beside him. Escort them to legal. Their termination packets have already been processed. Richard laughed once, hollow. You can't just... Richard, Amara interrupted, her tone almost kind. I already did. The guards stepped forward. Chairs scraped. The same sound that had humiliated her that morning now played in reverse, power reclaiming its echo. As they left the room, Amara turned to the remaining staff. Some looked terrified, others relieved. She didn't want fear. She wanted clarity. You have choices, she said, scanning each face. Stay, rebuild, or step aside. What we do from this moment decides whether Nexus becomes the company we promised or the one they tried to turn it into. A young finance director raised her hand tentatively. Miss Johnson, what about the investors? Amara smiled faintly. They'll follow results, not rumors, and I plan to deliver both. She clicked another key. The dashboard changed again, this time displaying projections, product timelines, and new leadership assignments. Effective immediately, she said. Department heads will report directly to me for a 30-day restructuring audit. No one argued. They just nodded, quietly grateful to be led by someone who'd survived the storm and come back sharper. Kara's voice broke the tension. Press wants a statement. Do you want to prepare something formal? Amara closed the laptop. No. They've already seen enough. Let the silence speak for a while. She stood and looked out the window. The skyline was still slick with rain, the clouds parting just enough for a strip of gold light to break through. It fell across her reflection, strong, composed, utterly in control. Behind her, Kara whispered, "It's done." Amara shook her head gently. "No, it's restored." For a long moment, she just watched the city breathe below her. Every story, every post, every rumor now ended the same way. She came back. By dawn, the city was already awake. Every news ticker, every digital billboard, every trending page was glowing with her name. Amara Johnson reinstated as Nexus CEO. What had begun as a 60-second clip had turned into a 24-hour global reckoning. Airports, coffee shops, living rooms, screens everywhere replayed the same two images. Amara being escorted out, and 6 hours later, walking back into her building as its rightful owner. The contrast was cinematic, almost mythic. People didn't just watch, they felt it. Comment sections flooded like rivers. Number "they fired her" trended for an hour. Then number "she bought it back" overtook it. Even rival CEOs reposted the clip with captions like, "This is leadership." Activists called it a turning point for equity in tech. Journalists called it the comeback of the decade. Amara didn't call it anything. She was too busy working. Inside Nexus, the morning light spilled through the glass facade. Employees returned to their desks with a new kind of energy. No corporate slogans, no forced smiles. Just quiet respect. In the lobby, someone had taped a handwritten note to the wall. "Welcome home." Upstairs, Amara stood in the same boardroom where it had all started. The screens were dark now, wiped clean of chaos. Kara entered with a tablet full of press requests. "CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, even Vogue," she said, half laughing. "They all want you on record." Amara smiled faintly. "They already have the record. The footage is the statement." Kara hesitated. "Do you want me to issue a formal victory press release?" Amara shook her head. "Victory implies a battle. What I did was correction." She turned toward the panoramic window. Below, clusters of people stood outside Nexus headquarters, holding signs that read "Dignity Wins" and "Silent Power." Some had come just to see her walk by. Others were live streaming, narrating in awe. One voice carried over the crowd. "She didn't yell, she just acted." That line spread online within minutes. Amara's phone buzzed, a text from her mother, short and trembling with pride. "I saw everything. You didn't just buy a company, baby. You bought your freedom back." Amara closed her eyes, letting that sentence settle like warmth through her chest. She remembered her first office, cheap blinds, second-hand chairs, a coffee pot that sputtered more than it brewed, and how she'd told her tiny team, "We're not building tech, we're building trust." Now that trust was global. Kara approached softly. "You know, people are calling you the quiet revolution." Amara chuckled. "Revolution's a big word. I just didn't let them finish my story." Downstairs, a CNN reporter faced the camera. And in less than a single business day, Amara Johnson turned public humiliation into a masterclass in power reclamation. When asked for comment, her spokesperson said only, "She's working." Oh. The feed cut to a slow-motion clip Amara exiting the elevator that morning, phone in hand, the building's security staff stepping aside as the crowd erupted in applause. That moment froze on every headline thumbnail. Back upstairs, Kara looked at her boss, the calm after the storm. "So, what now?" she asked. Amara smiled, eyes still on the horizon. "Now," she said, "we start building the company they thought they could steal." She turned away from the skyline and walked back toward the table, the same seat, same air, but a different woman. Behind her, the world kept watching. Not a scandal anymore. A symbol. The week that followed felt unreal. Cameras disappeared, protest signs came down, and Nexus returned to the quiet hum of servers and footsteps. But something fundamental had shifted, like the building itself had exhaled. Amara moved through the halls without an entourage. Every nod from an employee carried a different weight now. Respect, not fear. People spoke softer, listened longer. The culture had changed overnight, not by decree but by example. In the new strategy room, walls once covered with stock projections now displayed a single phrase in black letters: "Silent Power." Amara stood before it with her team Kara, the young analyst who had filmed the morning incident, and a handful of department heads who'd chosen to stay. "This," she said, "isn't just branding. It's who we become. We build technology that listens more than it talks." A murmur of agreement swept the room. Kara added, "New slogans. New noise. Just proof." Amara nodded. "Exactly. We'll let results speak." The first order of business was rebuilding trust. Employee contracts were rewritten for transparency, clear pay scales, clear accountability. The second was restructuring leadership. Flat, not vertical. Everyone in that room would answer not just upward, but outward to teams, to clients, to community. Later that afternoon, Amara recorded an internal video message. No makeup, no stage, just sunlight filtering through the window behind her. "You've all seen what happens when power forgets purpose. We're going to make sure that never happens again. Nexus exists to make integrity scalable." The clip was sent to all 7,000 employees. Within an hour, inboxes flooded with replies. "Thank you. Welcome back. We're ready." At headquarters, crews began removing the frosted glass walls that separated executives from staff. Amara watched as light spilled freely across the open floor. She turned to Kara. "Transparency shouldn't just be a word on a website." Kara smiled. "Feels good to see the sunlight reach everyone." That evening, Amara met with the junior team that had joined during the scandal. Most had never spoken to her directly. They expected a speech. Instead, she asked questions. "What's broken? What would you fix first if this were yours?" They hesitated at first, then answered honestly. She wrote down every word. Before they left, she told them, "You won't need to record the next meeting. You'll be part of it." Outside, the sky turned violet over Manhattan. The storm clouds that had shadowed the city a week ago were gone, leaving a clean, calm horizon. Amara stood by the window again, fingers resting lightly on the glass. For the first time since that morning, she felt something close to peace. Not victory stability. Justice didn't roar, it resonated. Behind her, Kara closed the conference door softly. "Tomorrow's agenda?" she asked. Amara smiled. "Rebuild day one. No cameras, just work." The lights dimmed, the hum of the servers filled the silence, and the building seemed to settle into its new rhythm, steady, transparent, alive. Somewhere far below, a maintenance worker paused by the lobby plaque freshly replaced with a single inscription, "Nexus Dynamics founded and restored by Amara Johnson." He smiled, nodded once, and kept walking. By the end of the month, the ripples had become waves. What happened inside Nexus no longer belonged to one company. It had become a mirror for an entire industry. Tech blogs called it the silent power doctrine. Business schools dissected Amara's 6-hour turnaround like scripture. Headlines read, "How a fired black CEO redefined corporate justice without saying a word." On CNBC, a panel of executives debated her every move. One man in a Navy suit said, "It was reckless. You can't run a billion-dollar firm on sentiment." A woman beside him replied, "She didn't run it on sentiment, she ran it on structure. She just reminded us who built it." The clip went viral. Again, in boardrooms across the country, CEOs were suddenly reviewing their own bylaws. Who had founder rights? Who really held the power to remove whom? The system had been cracked open by one woman's calm. Amara watched all this unfold from her office, the same one they'd once emptied of her belongings. Kara entered with a small smile. "You've been on every news feed for 29 days straight." Amara didn't look up from her laptop. "Let them talk. While they analyze, we execute." She turned her screen toward Kara. A new project outline glowed. Project Echo Ethical Core Hosting Operations. A program designed to help other startups protect their founders, prevent internal sabotage, and embed justice into structure. "We'll license it open source," Amara said. "No paywalls. If they try to silence one of us again, they'll have to silence thousands." Kara exhaled. "You're turning survival into infrastructure." Amara smiled faintly. "Exactly. The best revenge is replication." That afternoon, Amara joined a virtual conference with global investors. Dozens of faces appeared on her screen, some cautious, some curious. She didn't give a presentation, no slideshow, no speech. Just one line. "What you witnessed wasn't a scandal. It was a prototype." Then she walked them through the numbers. Since her reinstatement, employee retention had risen 40%. Share price, once collapsing, now climbed higher than before. Media goodwill had converted to investor confidence. When she finished, no one asked about her race, her gender, or her silence. They asked how to apply her model to their own firms. Later that evening, A letter arrived from the National Women's Business Council. You are not just a CEO, you are precedent. Amara read it once, then set it aside. Precedent was never the goal. Sustainability was. From the office window, she could see the skyline blinking alive, dozens of towers, thousands of offices, all filled with people trying to prove something. She thought of every young woman watching her clip, every intern who'd been told to keep quiet, every founder who'd been underestimated in silence. Her phone buzzed an email from a small tech startup in Detroit. We used your open source founder protocol. They tried to remove me. It didn't work. Thank you. Amara stared at the message for a long time, then closed her eyes. The storm she started had become shelter for others. Kara peeked through the door. More interviews? Amara shook her head. Not today. What then? Amara smiled, eyes still on the skyline. Let's start designing the next storm. Outside, the city lights shimmered on glass towers, silent, steady, unafraid. And somewhere deep in the heart of corporate America, the system kept whispering her name. The cameras had long gone, but the echoes stayed. Fame, even the kind built on justice, leaves residue tiny fingerprints of exhaustion that no applause can wash off. It was nearly midnight when Amara finally closed her laptop. The office was dark except for the skyline, thousands of lights blinking like open eyes, watching her. She'd spent the day approving new policies, mentoring young founders, answering congratulations she didn't know how to feel. When Kara peeked in, she was holding 2 cups of tea instead of coffee. You should go home, she said softly. Amara smiled without looking up. Home is overrated. Peace is portable. But her tone carried a tired edge, one that even she couldn't smooth out. Kara sat across from her. You haven't taken a single day off since the takeover. Amara leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You know what they don't tell you about victory? It's loud when you win, but quiet when you heal. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just honest. Outside, rain began again, a softer version of the storm that started it all. Amara stood and walked to the window. Below, Nexus headquarters glowed with a steady pulse. No chaos, no shouting, just work. She watched a janitor mop the lobby floors, the same man who'd held the door for her the morning she was escorted out. He looked up, saw her silhouette, and nodded once. Amara nodded back. A small exchange, but it felt like closure. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Board meeting, tomorrow, 8 a.m. For a moment, she thought about canceling it. Then she smiled faintly. Even justice has maintenance hours. Kara stood to leave, but paused at the door. Can I ask you something? After everything, do you ever get angry? Amara turned, eyes calm but deep. Anger built the spark. Discipline carried the fire. But peace, that's what keeps it burning. Kara exhaled, understanding. You're not rebuilding a company anymore, you're rebuilding meaning. Amara's voice softened. Maybe both. She walked back to her desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a single photo her first office, 7 years ago. 3 people, mismatched furniture, cables running everywhere. In the corner of the picture, a younger version of herself grinning wide, no blazer, no armor. She traced the edges with her thumb and whispered, You were right to start. You just didn't know the price. The clock ticked toward midnight. The city outside was quieter now, the kind of stillness only earned after a storm. Amara powered down her laptop, slid the photo inside her journal, and gathered her coat. Before leaving, she wrote a single sentence on the whiteboard behind her desk. Power means nothing if it doesn't restore. She stared at it for a while, then smiled, soft, genuine, unguarded. It wasn't a quote for headlines. It was a reminder for herself. As she stepped into the hallway, Kara asked, Where to? Amara pressed the elevator button. Home. Maybe this time, I'll let it feel like home again. The doors closed. The lights dimmed. And for the first time since the morning they dragged her out, Amara Johnson left the building not as a symbol, not as a story, but as a woman who'd survived her own legend. Outside, the rain fell steady cleansing, rhythmic, familiar, a new kind of silence. 6 months later, the world had moved on, at least on the surface. Trends faded, new scandals rose, and fresh stories replaced the old. But beneath the noise, something subtle endured. The quiet architecture of change. Nexus dynamics had transformed. The open-floor headquarters was now filled with light, green walls, and laughter, echoing where whispers once lived. Employees spoke freely. Every Friday, Amara hosted open forums where interns could question executives without fear. They called it the Circle. To outsiders, it looked like innovation. To Amara, it was redemption, made visible. Her philosophy, silent power, had become more than a phrase. It was a framework taught at universities, cited in leadership books, and printed on posters in companies that once ignored names like hers. But Amara refused interviews. She said enough had been said on her behalf. The story belonged to those who needed it, not to the one who lived it. One crisp morning, she arrived at the building before sunrise. No cameras, no crowd, just the hum of servers warming up. She walked through the lobby, now lined with photos of early employees and milestones. In the center hung one new addition, a still frame from that viral video the moment she turned at the door before being escorted out. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "Dignity is not negotiable." Amara stopped in front of it. For a moment, she saw the faces of everyone who had doubted her, the guards, the board, the millions of strangers who had watched her humiliation as entertainment. And then she smiled. Because the story didn't end there. It ended here where she stood, alive, at peace, restored. Later that day, she met with a group of young founders, women, men, people of every shade, participants of the new Silent Power Fellowship. They came from cities she'd never been to. Lagos, Detroit, Manila, São Paulo. Each had been dismissed once. Each had refused to stay quiet. She listened more than she spoke, only adding what was necessary. "You'll be tested," she told them. "They'll mistake your calm for weakness. Let them. That mistake is your advantage." After the session, one of the fellows, a young black woman clutching her startup pitch, approached shyly. "Miss Johnson," she said, "the day you were fired, I was ready to quit my own company. But then I saw how you looked at them. You didn't fight to prove them wrong, you just kept your truth steady. It changed me." Amara's smile reached her eyes. Good. Then the silence worked. That evening, as she prepared to leave, Kara handed her a small envelope. "No sender," she said. Amara opened it. Inside was a single card. In neat handwriting, it read, "I was one of the guards. Thank you for treating us like people even then." She held the card for a long time before placing it on her desk beside the first patent file she'd ever signed. Two symbols of power, one built by vision, one restored by grace. Outside, the city glowed in the soft orange of sunset. Amara stood by the window, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond her reflection. Somewhere out there, someone else was being underestimated. And somewhere soon, another story like hers would begin. She whispered, almost to herself, "Power isn't about volume, it's about presence." The last light of day fell across her face, turning her silhouette to gold. No headlines, no cameras, just the rhythm of quiet justice fulfilled. And for the first time, the silence didn't need to roar. It simply was.